Welcome everyone to the Centre for International Trade and Business in Asia, CITBA International Conference on Business, Economics, Management and Sustainability. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands we meet today, both virtually and in person, from far and wide, and pay my respects to the elders past and present. My name is Dr. Chris McLaughlin, and I'm Practice Director at Cultivate, a Far North Queensland-based firm providing Indigenous and integrated legal, business, strategy and research services, primarily to regional, rural, remote and Indigenous community service providers. We're professionals enhancing community-led development. Today, I'll be chairing an experienced panel of remote Cape York and Torres Strait-based local government mayors on the topic of community-led adaptation and innovation strategies of remote Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities in Northern Australia. It's my absolute pleasure today to welcome our panel members and very good friends of mine, Councillor Vonda Malone, Mayor of the Torres Shire Council, and Councillor Keri Tamwoy, Mayor of the Aurukun Shire Council. Welcome everyone, and thanks for giving up some of your precious time to talk to us today. The first question today is, what are some of the unique risks faced by your remote communities in Northern Australia? And what adaptive and innovative strategies have your communities employed to aid in combating some of these risks? Mayor Malone, did you want to start?
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for inviting me to be on this panel discussion today. With the Torres Shire Council, so a very remote council in the Torres Strait, we have been grappling with issues around water security, and I do believe that it's also a combination of things, drawing of additional on our supply, particularly for our FIFO services that we deliver outside of our community, so into the rest of the Torres Strait and the Northern Peninsula area. There's additional demand over the last couple of years, as well as the impact of climate change has made it that our communities have not received the quota that they've usually get during our wet season, and hence council was grappling with this issue from the previous term and onto this term. So in relation to how we had to address this was just really look at what is the demand and how do we make it, secure for those that are within the residents, as well as those that are needing to provide essential services throughout our region. So there was quite a lot of advocacy done on our behalf, particularly in 2017, where we were right at the bottom of our water supply. And that meant really working closely with the Queensland government to attract much needed dollars to upgrade what was pretty aging infrastructure in relation to supply between islands. So in the advocacy was just looking at how do we look at strengthening the existing infrastructure, as well as how do we make sure that we cater adequately into the future, knowing that this will always be a demand and being a regional hub. So the advocacy was successful in getting 12 million, and in that we had to look at the whole spectrum of our water supply, which includes the aging infrastructure, the water pipes, all these not sexy things that are underground, but essential to ensuring that there were no leakages when it was provided from one island underwater to other islands within our cluster of islands, as well as just making sure that the water pipes themselves were clean. So doing some ice pigging, so the water, the build-up of any of that, the years have been removed, so it was clean water. Having a filtration system that is state of the art, that uses UV, so that it would take away any things that were in the water that can cause concerns with people's health, as well as making sure that we had monitoring systems in place, the state-of-the-art water monitoring systems, so we could see the water levels at any time and into any household if there were leaks. So it was quite a big piece of work, and we're just at the end of that now in seeing that come into fruition, but at the same time that knowing that we will be able to be in the best position to manage, and of course also having our communities work with us to ensure that they're water wise. So a lot of education messaging about being water smart and how that this is a very precious commodity.
Then Malone, how is the sufficiency of funding now in relation to water infrastructure? So you've done an awful lot of advocacy. I'm guessing that there's still quite a large need for additional funding in that space.
We have maximised, and any funding that we do receive is just maximising on the use of that and leveraging that off, with state and with other Commonwealth funding. So in this case, it was from the state government, and then seeing how we could complement it with other programs that are out there for local councils. So being smarter too is and making sure that we work with other like councils. So within Cape and Torres, we are part of an alliance with the Torres and Cape.
You said
Indigenous
you've done a fair
Alliance.
bit of advocacy. What does that advocacy look like?
Well, essentially, we do have to travel to, where the decision makers are, and that's being in Brisbane or to Canberra. So within that is really making sure that we have our facts in play and having the data to support that. So having materials so that we make a greater impact when we do have that one-on-one direct deputation, and the work and I guess inviting our various ministers and premier to visit our shores, working with our elected leaders in the respect of state as well as the federal members, and doing that as a collective so that it gets greater impact. And like I mentioned before, working with other like councils in the space of advocacy, because we are very small councils, and we need to work greater in across our region so that it has more emphasis on improving the quality of life for our Indigenous residents.
So would that include through TICA and those sort of bodies where you've sort of come together as an alliance?
So definitely using the alliance of 14 councils, or now 13 councils with the Torres and Cape Indigenous Councils Alliance, where we do work and I guess put forward our strategic issues that would benefit all of us. Around economic participation, obviously water security, waste management are one of our key areas of concern. So how do we do that as a collective and not taking away from what our own communities' requirements are? So it has worked very effectively. That way our governments, both from the state and the federal level, do have that I guess knowledge and understanding that this is a greater need, and it really is benefiting a population that is sparse, but essentially still part of an important part of Australia.
So Mayor Tamwoy, from your area there in the Aurukun Shire, what are some of the unique risks faced by your remote communities, particularly, and how do you adapt and provide some innovative strategies or community-led strategies to aid in combating some of these unique risks in your area?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Some of the risks Aurukun faces as a community is flooding and isolation. And during what we call the wet season, we get disconnected from the rest of the Cape and beyond. For example, we get disconnected from Weipa, our nearest bigger town, because the Mile Creek goes up, and then it means that we cannot also travel to Cairns by road because the rivers like Archer and Laura River rise and make it impossible for us to travel, and not to mention all the other creeks in between. We also become culturally isolated We cannot access country on the southern Vic homelands because of the flooding that happens on homelands. It's been known that the Aurukun wetlands is the second largest to Kakadu during the wet. And also when the Wenlock River goes up, we cannot travel to, say, NPA and Torres Straits for cultural reasons also. There'd be more FIFO services in community because no one wants to be here during the wet, so they fly in, fly out, which leaves our youth and the elderly vulnerable. There's a lot of risks associated with services not being provided 100% in community because of FIFO. Our fresh produce, sometimes C-Swift can be a bit delayed, and then we'd have to wait on fresh produce, so it affects the fresh produce that comes into community. The other things are, the cost of business, cost of electricity, fuel and gas goes up because of freight costs. Yeah.
How long, Mayor Tamwoy, can you be cut off for in a given year? Just to give our audience a bit of an understanding as to how long that might be.
Well, if it's a pretty big, if it's a big wet season, we're looking at from November through to April.
That's remarkable.
Yeah.
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 That's I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't see up north as being stuck for that long. That's quite remarkable, considering how hot it gets from time to time as well.
Yeah.
You get sort of the worst of both. Okay.
Yeah, like contractors are unable to come in during the wet season also to do their works here in Aurukun. For example, Barmer Services had to leave early before the wet set in last year, and they were doing the project out on the upgrade of the dump. And so they had to leave early. That's just one example, like a small example. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I don't know if you heard the question about, what does your community do to try and combat some of these risks in community? So, do you have your own heavy machinery and those sort of things to be able to keep going with some of these projects during the wet?
Yes. Council does do own heavy machinery, and thankfully we have one contractor who has established themselves in Aurukun, which is CHC, and they pretty much own their own machinery, and we were pretty lucky to have them continue work with the new airport terminal even during the wet season. So that's
And what other sort of community-led initiatives have you got in place there to you're potentially up to 6 months cut off from the rest of the Cape? How do you manage as a community in that time?
Well, I guess because it's a part of our season in Aurukun, we actually have 7 seasons, and that's how the people live. The 7 seasons dictate to our lifestyles. So I guess we still manage to access country, the ones that are accessible, and just doing things within the community to keep ourselves busy.
You were saying that there's been a fair bit of investment from the council up there on things like your barge landing and those sort of areas which become quite family areas. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
The boat ramp is a very important location for Aurukun. That's where most families go to spend the day over the weekend. And it's a shared area. And, families just take families out. Council has set up little sheds on various locations by the waterside. And I guess just family going out in their family networks and just, catching some fish and having a good roast down. Yeah.
And you said that from an accessibility perspective. The barge landing and the boat ramp, it is a fair way out of community, but there is a footpath the whole way there now for that accessibility. Is that right?
Yeah. We've thought about our elderly and those that are on mobility scooters. And so what council has done is we've laid down some cement pathways along the riverside area so that the old people can access and get closer to the shore on their mobility scooters.
Fantastic. Well, it would be quite remiss of me at the moment, given where the world is at, not to discuss the threat or the ongoing threat and the impact of COVID-19 in your communities and how you've responded to it. So we've heard today from some very unique, risks and challenges which are common to the Cape York and Torres Strait communities. And we've showcased some of those community-led adaptation and innovation strategies for tackling them across subjects such as water security, competition for resources, health risks from international treaties such as the Torres Strait PNG Treaty, flooding and isolation, and of course COVID-19 as well. On behalf of the CITBA conference, I'd like to thank our panel members today, Councillor Vonda Malone, Mayor of the Torres Shire Council, and Councillor Keri Tamwoy, Mayor of the Aurukun Shire Council, for your valued contributions to this topic. This short session has been a really good opportunity to highlight some of these risks and the strategies which are being employed by our remote Indigenous communities to tackle them. But there's clearly a lot more work that needs to be done in this space and more assistance which is required to do it. So I'm really hopeful that this session is able to progress a wider conversation in that regard. Finally, a special thanks to CITBA Conference for providing this opportunity to showcase such an important national and international issue as part of its International Conference on Business, Economics, Management and Sustainability. If there are any offline questions, please feel free to flick them through to my email address, chris@cultivate, that is cultureve8.com.au, and we'll seek to get some consolidated responses from the panel members today as well. Thank you all for your time.